meeting to order. Please rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll call vote, please?
David Walker.
Here.
Soren Peterson. Chuck Schultz.
Here.
Mike Cunningham.
Here.
Jennifer Eden. Here. Al Poole.
Here.
And Marcy Husted's here.
Do we have any changes to the agenda? I'll entertain the motion.
So moved. Support.
Been motioned and supported to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next is approval of the consent agenda, the regular board meeting minutes from April 17th, 2018, clerk's warrants and bills.
So moved.
Second. It's been motioned and supported to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Next item on the agenda is communications. Item number 1 is notice of the annual Bastille Day race, run and walk. Item number 2 is the Livingston County Regional Wastewater Treatment Advisory Board minutes from March 20th, 2018. And item number 3 is the fireman report from March 31st, 2018.
So moved.
Support. Been motioned and supported to receive communications 1 through 3 and place them on file. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those are placed on file. Next is public remarks. It's the opportunity for the public to make any comment they'd like to the Township Board. If you'd like to speak, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address, if you would. Do you have any comments? Okay.
Hello, my
Hello.
name is Linda Kearney, and I live at 12231 Road, and
She's going to adjust the microphone so we can hear you.
I would just like to make some comments about the proposed cemetery. Would you like me to speak now, or would you rather?
Now's the proper time for public comment.
Okay, well, I would like to know what you guys were, because on the agenda it just says Part 1 and Part 2, but I have some comments about the proposed Jocelyn Cemetery. First of all, the land for the commercial cemetery must be separated, and it has to be divided from the large parcel before the special land use, I thought, could go into effect. If the land is to be given its own tax ID number and recorded at the Register of Deeds as a cemetery. The land division has not been approved yet, so can we still consider the special use permit, I guess is my question. Because this is a very special type of burial that we're not accustomed to, and we are all on wells for our water, and there are significant wetlands and artesian wells in the area, an environmental impact report is a responsible requirement to attach to the special use of once our aquifer is compromised, there's no going back. We must be proactive about allowing this use for the protection of all the residents of Tyrone Township. The applicant should be happy to provide this certainty, as they also live here and have well water for their families. That is our main concern, is the well water, is the water. The Planning Commission motion limited the burial sites to the 1589 as presented in the revised application. Any further expansion of the cemetery in the future must be revisited with the Planning Commission. The BC also requested the Township Board with the Livingston County Health Department set up a plan for monitoring of the groundwater in a manner that would ensure continuous checks that would identify a potential problem before it becomes a significant problem. We need to protect the aquifer in the township. The cemetery should provide the financial cost for such testing. And I'm wondering if this is going to be addressed. I would also like to state in the motion that the Livingston County Health Department recognizes this as a privately owned cemetery open to the public and requires the approval of the Livingston County Health Department in addition to the township approval. And I would hope that in the motion that the acreage that's to be used must be fenced, the entire 10 acres as required in the Livingston County Cemetery guidelines. That's my comments, and I hope how you handle them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would anybody else like to make comment?
Sure, I would. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ed Murray. I live at 12271 Germany Road. Couple things here. I brought this up at the last planning commission. State law for the burial of dead animals here in the state of Michigan, all right? No, this doesn't quite relate to the human body, but we are all, according to the state law, which is Act 239, 10,000 pounds of animal flesh. Sure. All right? They just didn't pull that figure out of the sky. Raise for cattle, horses, sheep, whatever. Now, if you have one large pit, you're only allowed 5,000 pounds of animal flesh. They stipulate this is water, okay? And you want to go on the computer, look up Act 239, it's all in there. Now, 10,000 pounds, right? At 1,589 grave sites on 1.3 average of 160 pounds per body, which is staggering at 180. It's now over 250,000 pounds of flesh on one. Insane. It's like somebody planting maybe 10 cattle in your front yard, okay? No, Act 239 is for the burial of dead animals. Goes the same as for a human being. There's no difference. I asked you to use common sense. Not make any sense to allow this quantity on 1.3 acres that's surrounded by wetlands, has no Argentine springs. So I want remember what I'm telling you here, because law is going to, I deny listening to that. Quantity is way too much for the amount of ground we're looking at. Last thing, I'd like to know if they've applied for the application for new cemetery, Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory. If they have not, when are they going to apply for that license? That needs to be done. That's all part of starting a cemetery. like the rest of all the people here, we're concerned about the water, and reason being, the quantity on that 1.3 acres, it makes no sense. Thank you very much for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Elaine Schilling, 12330 Elcoy. Today I'm talking a little bit about the cemetery guidelines, which you all have a copy of. I wanted to point out a couple of things. We do understand they're merely guidelines, that they're not regulations, but they were written to help the county and the township to protect our environment and our drinking water. These guidelines were written for small family cemeteries, and a family cemetery is considered by the county to be 1 acre of land. The cemetery that we're considering here tonight is 10 acres, with 1.3 acres allotted for nearly 1,589 burial sites. They'll be spread out over 1.3 acres. When our county did the tests, the soil tests for the cemetery, the county repeatedly mentioned to refer to these cemetery guidelines. That's what caught our attention, why we were looking at the cemetery guidelines. And I am a believer that there's a lot of value in these guidelines because they were referred to so often by the county. I would also like to point out that the experience and wisdom of our county forefathers in 2002, who compiled this document, that they were certainly looking to our benefit. We consider them guidelines for all cemeteries. In the cemetery guidelines, and I made sure to give you a copy tonight, on page 2, number 4, it states that construction of cemeteries will not be allowed in environmentally sensitive areas such as floodplains, swamps, wetlands, ravines, steep slopes, drainage areas to river, lakes, or other waterways. The cemetery we're considering is located in the Shiawassee watershed. The Roe report, which was done in April of 2017, indicates there are wetlands that extend to the north and west of this cemetery site. Well, they also extend to the south, too, because I know I've lived here for 40 years. The surface water that flows through these wetlands flows primarily to the south and to the west. It flows through a creek on Germany Road that goes south. The water then goes through a large area of swampy land and through several properties on Elcoy Drive. This swampy area is also fed by several artesian springs, one which springs right outside of Elcoy Drive. The surface water flows about 200 feet from our well, so we are concerned about the safety of our drinking water. It flows south and west to more wetlands and more ponds over by Lake Tyrone. Eventually it flows north, like Matt Bowling said, it flows into Orr Creek, Lake Shannon, and eventually the Shiawassee River. This is no place for a cemetery. Not a family cemetery, not a private cemetery, not any cemetery. We feel that our water and our wells are in great danger of being contaminated. We feel that our township and county officials have a responsibility to protect our water. On page 2, number 5, the depth of the burial is limited by site and the ability to safely excavate. A minimum depth of burial shall include at least 4 feet of cover. This distance may be decreased at the discretion of the health officer. Mr. Bowling from the Livingston County has suggested to this township that the hole depth be only 3 feet. We disagree with that. On page 3, number 1, a cemetery shall be at least 100 feet from the surface water. There's a large pond of water that sits right near the driveway entrance to the cemetery, and it's wet there most of the year. It's not 100 feet from the cemetery. On page 4, number 5, the Livingston County Department of Public Health shall reject the proposed cemetery if a threat to the public health or safety exists. Page 5, number 4. Sites with a high water table will not be allowed for a new cemetery. Minimum depth to seasonal high water table of 6 feet shall be required. The planned cemetery sits on a mound. It's dry up there. But I can guarantee if you go off of the mound, at 6 feet you're going to find water. There needs to be more test holes in the land that surrounds the designated cemetery. Page 5, number 4. Sites with the high water table will not be allowed for a new cemetery. Minimum depth to seasonal high water table of 6 feet shall be required. Planned cemetery is on a mound. There needs to be more test holes. On page 5, number 5. Sites with environmental sensitive areas, floodplains, swamps, wetlands, creek drainage areas are not suitable for new cemeteries. There's no place to put this kind of cemetery. I think the people who wrote these guidelines for our county were wise, and I think we need to be very careful about allowing any cemetery in this part of our township. Our committee has repeatedly requested an environmental impact report, but this has not yet been met. Matt Bowling from the Livingston County Health Department says it's a very expensive project. He does not feel it's necessary, but we disagree. We feel an environmental impact report is absolutely necessary, and we're asking this board to consider our request. The cemetery is not just your usual, typical kind of cemetery, and this board has a right to request an environmental impact report. We're asking you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm Donita Sanders. I live at 12345 Alcoy Drive. I've got a statement from my husband if he doesn't make it. He had a class till 6:45, so he's going to be here as soon as he can. If he's not here, I'll read his if you'll allow me. My concern with the approval process of the proposed Yassen Cemetery is that it has not been adequately vetted by individuals with the expertise to provide protection to the community. At the last meeting of the Planning Commission, in addition to the committee members, was Matt Bowling representing Livingston County Health Department. The discussion evolved into a consideration, understanding, and the plan of testing some of the surrounding water wells in the community for potential contamination of the water with microorganisms leaching from the burial sites. My husband's a professor with his degree in infectious disease. He's going to cover that a little bit better. The logic of this approach was not questioned by the committee members or the Livingston County Health Department representative. The glaring problem with this approach is that it identifies a problem after it occurs and does nothing to protect the water supply of the community. The correct approach to protecting the community would be to regularly monitor test bores around the proposed cemetery plot for microbial leaching from the cemetery. Such monitoring should be done by an independent and qualified agency or company to do such analysis, from the sampling to testing to public reporting. The very basics of this testing should be done prior to the first burials to establish a baseline, and at regular intervals thereafter when the temperatures and water levels are optimal for detecting microbial and decomposition product leaching from the water wells, specifically in the spring and summer, because in the winter you're not going to get anything to grow. This would be a sound and logical approach to preventing a potential public health problem before our wells are contaminated. There are additional concerns about the suitability of the soil and water table in the area for establishing a cemetery, along with a more thorough discussion of the liabilities associated with green burial, whose benefits have been touted, but an understanding of increased microbial and decomposition product load have not. They don't know a whole lot about green burials. They're real new. I think they're going to be sad that they didn't do a little bit more research on this. I hope we're not sad for that fact. All of these concerns suggest a functional lack of due diligence in the approval process. We've tried, we've gone to the county, the state, anybody we could think of to do this. And everybody says, well, talk to the township, talk to the county, talk to the state. Nobody really will answer any of our questions. When individuals in authority with inadequate knowledge of the risks rely on individuals with limited knowledge to vet a process, the public interests have not been protected. In other words, if you don't have an expert, if you got somebody, well, I kind of know something and it's okay, that's not good enough. This is particularly true if concerns have been brought forth and there are published sources to support those concerns. We've given the planning board paper after paper. They approve the process anyway, and they're sending it to you. It is particularly concerning if the residents have had to bring these concerns to local government as opposed to being brought forth by the entities in charge of protecting public health. That's mine, and he's not here. If you will allow me to read his.
Please do.
This is Jerry Sanders, professor at UM Flint, 12345 Alcoy Drive, Fenton, Michigan. Another lapse in knowledge and expertise that was relied upon to reach an approval by the Planning Commission was a Livingston County Health Department representative using the analogy of a septic system compared to the cemetery, which was incorrect on multiple levels, as septic tank systems process small amounts of metabolized waste continuously in a controlled, restricted environment, limiting the load of the drainage fields. You all have septic systems. You know, has your water ever been contaminated with a septic system? I don't think so. The proposed cemetery would deliver a large amount, on average 160 pounds per body, of unprocessed material, he's calling it material instead of bodies, to the soil for decomposition in an uncontrolled environment, especially if it's 3 feet under. The coyotes are going to dig them up, for one thing, providing a significant microbial organic load on the surrounding soil. The weather with temperature and moisture changes would make decomposition discontinuous. In other words, it ain't going to happen in the winter. It's going to wait till it warms up. And with the addition of additional bodies, it will increase the load on the soil. In other words, all at once when it thaws, that's when everybody's going to start to decontaminate. Depending on the frequency of burials, it could be thought of as having multiple families using the same pit latrine, all during a 3 to 4 month period of the year. I don't know if y'all know what pit latrines are, but they're not pleasant. I'm from Texas, I know what they are. A more appropriate analogy was Michigan requirements for disposal of animal carcasses, which we've gone over. It's Michigan Bodies of Dead Animals Act 239. And the analogy says decomposition of unprocessed material, flesh, in a native state, not embalmed, occurs in an uncontrolled environment. A representative was unfamiliar with the Act 239 and related rules as he incorrectly equated the 10,000-pound burial limit per acre to a per-event limit instead of the correct ruling of a total limit per acre, in essence, a lifetime limit. 10,000 pounds, that's it. They don't get to put another carcass in there. If similar rules were applied to the cemetery, it would pose a limit of around 63 bodies, dependent on weight, because we took the 10,000, divided it by 160 pounds, came out with 62.5. Those errors apparently have not been corrected by anybody. An embalmed body, those that we normally think of, means a reduced microbial load because of the embalming fluid. The embalming fluid kills the microbes. And the current embalming fluid decomposes in a few days. They've made it a whole lot better than it was back in the day when Grandma and Grandpa got buried. And that embalming fluid does not pose a continuing risk, as is the potential for increased microbial load for green burials. We don't know a whole lot about green burials. So my husband says, therefore, my humble suggestion would be an independent environmental assessment to evaluate the site and surrounding area by a qualified firm or agency. If approved, testing should be done prior to the first burials to establish a baseline and at a regular interval when temperature and water levels are optimal for detecting microbial leaching. That's when your body's decomposing and flowing through the ground. That's called leaching. These testing results should be made available to the public to prevent the public health problem. In other words, remediation before water contamination. So if we find it in the first well, do something about it. And then his last point, he says there should be extended public and further study on this issue before it's approved. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comments. Were there any other public comments? Thank you, everybody, for your comments. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is unfinished business, and we have none. So we're going to move into item number 1, which is the DeRocher Outdoor Storage and Construction Off-Site Plan and Special Land Use Application. Alan, did you want to give us a summary of this?
Yeah, this, I guess you probably know, is right down at Fawcett Road and Old 23. They've met all of our conditions and requirements, and we would recommend that approval for this.
Okay. Anybody have any comments?
This is the place on the corner of Fawcett and Old US 23.
Just south of Suburban Propane. It is zoned PCI, so it is it a use that fits the zoning district, and basically there was an old house there with a pole barn, and he's using that for storage of his construction material. And there's a pollution plan in place. Light maintenance will be performed. Any heavy maintenance will be performed off-site.
So moved.
Support.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the special land use permit for the DeRocher Outdoor Storage and Construction Office Site Plan. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Next is item number 2, the Yashin LLC Cemetery Site Plan and Special Land Use Permit. Mr. Yashin is present as his engineering firm. I'm sorry, your name from Rowe Engineering is? Okay. And we also have our attorney here, John Harris, and our engineer, Mr. Westmoreland. So if we have any questions that need to be asked from the board, we can direct it towards those people. So as you know, we've had for over a year now, we've been going on. The Yashin Cemetery. Cemeteries are permitted use in the FR zoning district. There's been several discussions and back and forths on this, and Al, can you bring us up to speed a little bit about how the Planning Commission addressed this, the concerns,
Yeah.
comments from the Health Department, please?
As you know, that we've had a lot of concerns about this. But we went back and cleaned up our regulations for cemeteries, and then they have met all of our requirements for cemetery, as long as the land division is completed, splitting the 10 acres off from, I believe it's 80 acres, in a reasonable time. But from a planning commission aspect, they've met all the regulations, so.
I know that one of the things that needs to be established if this gets approved is that they have to set up an endowment fund, and I'd like to see if there's any motions made that is included, that we get an annual report on that endowment fund to make sure that it's in place. Any other comments or thoughts?
I get a question. So given the level of sensitivity that there is there a reason that, and I understand that there's an expense load attached to it, but I'd much rather spend the money now as opposed to later. Is there a reason that one of the conditions was not a requirement for a environmental impact study?
Did you want to answer that, John, as far as a legal aspect? I know that we don't have a provision in our ordinance that.
Right.
I'm good with John
requires
answering
that.
it either way.
So,
I don't know what the planning commission,
Right, I get that.
what was brought to their attention.
right.
I would only make some suppositions based on. Wetland determination, the minutes that satisfied the planning commission that health concerns were addressed to their satisfaction with the requirements of the ordinance. The board has the authority, I believe, to a special land use application. It's up to you to make that determination. The fact that it's not specifically required in the ordinance doesn't mean that you can't do it. It is a huge expense, though. Have to residents have legitimate concerns. Nothing objective to support. Rely on health department are tested for us. Apparently, the township would defer to the health department. Report, it's pretty straightforward. What they perceive to be groundwater, which is their concern. Caused me a lot of concern. Residents don't feel it was adequately tested around the site, perimeter, not enough boring holes. Those are judgment calls that professionals have to make. Decided to do in this case. Process is somewhat new. I'm sure there's a whole lot of I don't know. I'm not an advocate here for the applicant.
Sure.
I'm trying to defend whatever action this board would ultimately take, and I have to be able to defend it. Active rather than speculative concerns. And I don't mean to dismiss the people's at this point. But if long way around, Mr. Walker, is that yes, you in making that determination.
But from the perspective of the belt and suspenders approach, right? So we got a belt. Do we really want an extra set of suspenders? We're certainly within our purview to ask for an environmental impact study to. Okay.
I got a couple questions on these statistics, which were very interesting, so thank you. So try not to go around in circles here, but 62.5 burials per year at 24 years would give you a complete capacity of the cemetery. Now, that would put you at 10,000 pounds per year. If that's what regulation for human burial is, I think it's more of animal burial, but I get you're right, it's all the same. Now, what is the expected, I'm sure nobody really expects how fast it'll fill up, we hope not fast, but, you know, these things, I mean, is there a diminishing return on when the leaching decreases as time goes on for each body? And I'm just trying to be objective here to put some sort of logic to all this. That puts you at 7 bodies per year, so that you don't go over any type of weight per acre, per se. I mean, there's so much unknown here to go off of as far as, I just struggle going with all these different statistics. And we can all make a statistic look bad or good. And I'm being objective, but at the same time, I mean, people got to go somewhere. You know, and I also understand that it is environmental impact. For crying out loud, there's animals that die every day out in the woods. Every single day. Thousands of pounds every day.
And that can be anywhere.
Anywhere. And of course, there is that risk of disease and all that other stuff. As far as stopping it, as far as at the township board level, they have to have the blessing of the health department, drain commission, and everything else like that, correct? They can't just, even though they get
County.
approval from the township board, they have to have
I believe county
blessing
and
from those
state
experts to even move forward.
were
And-
first.
I think the planning commission did their due diligence on it. Not only did they get a report from the health department, they challenged the report from the health department, and actually Matt Bolig came up and talked to the residents, he talked to the planning commission, and, you know, addressed concerns. And he stands firm on his thoughts that this is not going to pose an environmental threat to the drinking water or to the surface water.
And so, with that being said, all the other parameters that the township is deciding on is solely zone use. The use of the property.
Really? Yeah.
Right.
So if they get the use of the property as X, they still have to get the approvals of the other entities. Health Department, Drain Commission, you know.
Yeah,
You
we're
could have a
just
piece
the
of property, by
first
10
step.
acres of swamp, I can go start pulling, well, maybe not swamp, but to a point, I can go start pulling building permits on a certain structure and then find out I can't even put it on there because of environmental concerns or whatever. They wouldn't even let the building process continue. So, what are we voting on? Are we voting on the fact that this is an actual, not an environmental impact, and we're just gonna let this go through? Or are we voting on the fact that here is our zoning ordinance, and our regulations, and do they fit those?
And they've
I
met all
don't know if we're really voting on whether or not they have the approval from the health department or not. That is unfortunately not even in our hands. Is that correct, John?
Well, I think you're heading in the right direction. Have to process applications that come before us. Come to us and say, we want to use our land in a certain way. Adopted regulations and apparently modified as a result. Attributes that you have to consider is health, safety, welfare. You're talking about a special use permit. What effect will this use of the land have on the community property? And I think that's why the planning commission health department not aware of any other experts who could opine on this issue to give us information. that information and then comparing their application with our ordinance requirements, planning that recommendation together with all the supporting documentation for our final decision. We are a processing agency to the extent that we have to process applications that come before us. We have a little bit more flexibility and authority when it comes to special use. Health, safety, welfare aspect of it, it's important. Question. I think the plan recognized that in what they were doing. Have perhaps not the best knowledge or the perfect knowledge. Rely on for that sort of testing. Have unquestionably given a clean bill of health. Now, there's some people who suggest that that is ill-informed. They don't have specific on the expert advice on that issue. File all that documentation and make a decision. Long way of.
Sure, but to that end, within that question of we're a processing organization, we do put conditions on special land use permits that are not necessarily specified within the zoning, within the ordinance. We will attach things to it to say, we understand that, but in order to qualify for this special land use permit, it's conditional on the following that's not specific within the ordinance or the zoning.
And that would be for just a general business operation, perhaps
Sure.
days of the week, noise levels. There's all kinds of conditions that can be attached to a specific use.
But verification of a health, that is to say a health or safety issue, could be one of those conditions, justifiably.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll move this along. So I make the motion, assuming I get any support, I'll make the motion that this request be postponed until an environmental impact study is provided to the Township Board.
I'll second that.
By whom?
Pardon?
By whom?
By the requester.
Okay.
Sorry, forgot to tell you that. Sorry, I apologize. Actually, I apologize to Terry. That's really good.
So who did you say that again for the, repeat the motion?
Sure.
Clean it.
I'm saying that this approval be postponed until we receive a environmental impact study provided by the requester. That clarify it, Brian?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
So it's been motioned and supported to postpone the approval of the cemetery site plan and special land use pending an environmental impact study from the requester. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Go ahead.
The precautionary effect,
Yeah?
guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
With that being said, are we forcing them to do what's already been given them, the blessing? I'm just looking at the complete objective look at this. They've been given a blessing by the people we're supposed to go by.
I kind of have a tendency to agree with that. And I have heard that the Livingston County Health Department is one of the toughest ones in the state. In fact, the Livingston County Building Department is one of the most stringent in the state. You know, this is obviously a new road for us.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they would be so adamant in their decision if they felt for a second that there was a chance that this would cause contamination to any of our water sources.
So-called expert.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You've had your opportunity to
Can't.
speak, and this is
Board discussion.
time for the board to deliberate, and I appreciate your comments, but that's not the appropriate time to speak. Thank you.
Will we have a final chance
Sir?
to speak at the end of the meeting?
You have a chance to speak at the end of the meeting, but
Thank
right
you.
now, this is a board discussion.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, with that being said, they still have to get We've had report back from the Health Department Drain Commission. That is not their approval, correct?
Yeah, if I understand right, they need county
We need to
approval.
still get approval
And even
on
state
that.
approval, so.
That is their job to do that. Our job is to look at the ordinance.
Do they meet the requirements?
They meet the requirements. We're not, they still have to go through those processes to get those. Please step in and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to get to the basis of what we're voting on here, because if we're voting on things we're kind of stepping out of bounds to be voting on, I think that's wrong too.
Well, but I don't think we're voting on something that's out of bounds. If
This is discretionary with you
Yeah.
guys. It
Right.
really is. If you feel that the analysis of that issue, wetlands determination, Rocker suggested an environmental impact assessment. I was comfortable. Judgment call before we did that.
Does an environmental impact study for something like that cost? Not that it's irrelevant to the decision, I was just
The
curious.
engineers could tell you better than I could. It's a
How much is a couple of bucks? Not that it's material to the conversation, but how much is a couple of bucks?
Well, what kind of environmental impact study are you looking for? Phase 1
level?
or phase 2?
2, 3,
Phase
level.
two.
Yeah,
least.
because we actually have a motion pending for an environmental impact study, and what does that mean?
We could get a level 1, and they could get that they're getting an environmental impact study.
Yeah, level 1's pretty cheap and easy.
Yeah.
You know, when you start getting into the higher, and I'm not an expert in environmental impact studies, but you could easily run in the 5 to 10 grand range, I would think, for a full phase 2 environmental impact study. One's not gonna, a phase 1's not gonna tell you a whole lot, I don't think.
Phase 1 is not,
It's a walk
it's
around.
not going to help you at all.
Right.
Because the land has never been used for anything other than agricultural purposes. It's just been, what they do with Phase 1 is if you had a garage there, they test some of the soil around and they get the history.
Right.
It's
There's oils
more
there.
objective in terms of background.
Right.
It's if they discover either through history or testing that there is some level of contamination, they do Phase 2. And it's an analysis of, you know, a lot of soil borings, a lot of testing, records of discharge, found any barrels, things like that. That is, cost can be quite variable depending on what they find in their initial analysis. I think what you're looking for is not the traditional whether soil is contaminated, is what effect will a certain thing have on this land sometime in the future. That's a different animal that you're asking about for a typical Phase 1. And I would, yes, I'm not sure. Right offhand. What effect will this use have on this round? But it's going to be an expensive proposition. There's no question.
So for the purpose of clarification, if the seconder will approve, then I'll amend my motion to clarify that this will be Phase 2 environmental study to determine what the impact of this usage will have on the soil and water and health conditions in the immediate area.
Accepted.
Okay, the motion has been amended to include a Level 2 environmental impact study to determine if there's a impact on water, soil, and there was a third one? Health.
I could recommend that we don't call it Phase 2 because that.
What's the limitation attached to it?
It doesn't give you presumed, or
If you're making the motion. I'm
doesn't
not
give you a future
commenting on the
analysis.
efficacy of it, just I don't think Phase 2, it's in a different area.
Yeah, okay.
So I think you've described what you're looking for.
Impact study or-
So let's eliminate the phase 2 from it and just leave it at impact study, if the seconder agrees. Okay,
Okay. And you've got that right, Terry? Okay.
for the 5th time.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So, we're gonna wait for an environmental impact study. So, you can get with, our zoning administrator when you get that, and we'll bring it back to this. I don't think it needs to go back to the planning commission, it'll come back to the board. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Next is item number 3, Lake Shannon, 4 resolution approving plans, cost estimates, district, and preparing roll.
Get to where I need to be.
We'll just wait a second for everybody. Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay, so at our last board meeting, we held a public hearing for a special
Hold on a
assessment
second.
district.
Excuse me, sir. Hey, sir. If you'd like to have conversation, please step out into the hall. We're trying to conduct business. Thank you.
So we had a public hearing for a special assessment district for a road project in the Lake Shannon area, and this is the resolution approving petitions, project cost estimates, special assessment district, and causing the special assessment roll to be prepared.
This is just getting the prices and everything.
Right.
And they had their majority of the people around the lake do it, so
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I so resolve that we move forward with this.
Support?
It's been resolved and supported to schedule the second public hearing, and,
Oops. What's the next one?
I'm sorry, it's been resolved and supported to approve the plans, cost estimates, district, and preparing the roll for Lake Shannon. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Chuck Schultz,
Yes.
David Walker,
Yes.
Mike Cunningham.
Yes.
Jennifer Eden,
Yes.
Al Poole,
Yes.
Soren Peterson,
Yes.
and I say yes.
Resolution passes. Next is item number 4, Lake Shannon. 5, resolution to schedule the second public hearing and issue the required notices.
Resolved.
Support.
It's been resolved and supported for Lake Shannon resolution to schedule the second public hearing and issue required notices. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Jennifer Eden,
Yes.
Al Poole,
Yes.
Soren Peterson,
Yes.
Chuck Schultz,
Yes.
David Walker,
Yes.
Mike Cunningham,
Yes.
and I say yes.
Item number 6 is,
Item number 5.
5.
item number 5, that's right. I'm sorry. 3, 4. Item number 5 is the quote for repairs to the township hall's parking lot. Every couple years, we resurfaced this not too long ago. Every couple years, we bring in Allen's asphalt. They fill the cracks and seal the parking lot. Then they'll restripe the parking lot after they seal it. Cost for this is $3,367. Is anybody an objection of doing this?
So moved.
Support.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the quote for repairs to the township parking lot. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Next is item number 6. It's the quote for Park and Lane road repairs. As you know, they've had a maintenance agreement for their roads. This is to go out there and fill some cracks. The cost for this is $1,498. There's plenty of money in there.
In their SAD?
Repair,
Okay.
yeah, their SAD for this. So unless anybody wants to speak in opposition to that, then I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
Support.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the quote for Park and Lane road repairs. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Item number 7 is authorization for the Assistant Assessor to attend the Michigan Certified Assessing Program. This will get her to the next level. She's doing a really good job for us. As you know, we also passed a policy that if we pay for her training and she leaves within a year of completion of that training, she has to reimburse us for it. So the cost for this program is $1,000. Unless there's anybody that wants to speak in opposition to that.
We have it budgeted, right?
We do have it budgeted.
So moved.
Support.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the authorization for the Assistant Assessor to attend the Michigan Certified Assessing Officer Program. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, it's been a very long day. Next is new business, item number 8, the estimates for gravel road improvement projects. As we discussed earlier in the year, we talked about gravel road projects. We did determine that we were not going to look at doing partial road, but we're going to go ahead and finish out Heartland Road, which we started approximately 5 years ago. That'll take it all the way to partial road, which will be done, and then we can look at starting on something else in the future. The amount to complete that would be $75,000. We're basically paying for the gravel and the tree work. The road commission is going to do all the work, do all the ditching, so we have proper drainage out there.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that for me again? Did you say Heartland Road to?
It's going to go from Faucet
Oh, okay.
to partial, so
Got
it's pretty much a mile.
Got it, okay. Yep, that,
Yeah.
you clarified.
It's
That
actually
was-
the biggest chunk of gravel work.
No, you're fine, I was looking at the
we've
wrong
done.
one. That's, I was looking at the wrong one. That was my mistake.
That's okay, it happens.
I was just going, wait a minute, that doesn't look like what I'm looking
Okay.
at, so.
The second one is Mabley Hill Road. As you know, we've had some bad washouts over there. This is continuing on up to Germany Road to fix that problem. And I don't think we're going to do any more on Mabley Hill after this, but the cost for that is $38,000. And like I said, we discussed that we weren't going to split with Heartland on partial. We had talked about it, and they mentioned it, and both their township board and us decided it was something that it's not a high priority. There's other roads that need attention, so. Is there anybody that wants to speak in opposition to those? Okay, then we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the gravel road projects for Heartland Road and Mabley Hill Road. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Next is item number 9. This one came about, the road commission had additional funds this year for their primary pavement preservation program. As just to recap, if the township will pay 50% of the cost, they'll pay the other 50% of the cost. We've been doing several roads over the years, from Bennett Lake Road to Faucet Road to Denton Hill Road. Heartland Road, we kind of funded out of our own funds for that. This one is White Lake Road to Bennett Lake Road. And I don't know if you've ever driven that, but that,
Awful.
I wouldn't even call that a
Death
paved
trap.
road. It's,
Glorified dirt.
yeah, it's chunky. So I had her prepare the estimate. We do have ample money in our road fund for this project. I think it, kind of really helps, our road inventory get in a better situation than it's been.
Which is still technically not our responsibility.
Still technically not our responsibility, but, the only way to get anything done in the county
I get
is
that. I'm just-
to match
Meet 'em
funds.
I'm just
halfway.
publicly saying that this is not
With all the
our gig,
complaints
but-
and comments that we have.
Yeah, no, I got it.
People are not against doing this.
Yeah.
They still grind the fact that we shouldn't have to do this,
Oh, I
but
know.
in order to get it done, that's what we got to do. It's,
Grinds all of us that we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people use that stretch of road too, so.
yeah, they
Oh,
do.
yeah.
And I think it would be good value to the area. So the cost for the project is $200,000, and $100,000 will be our share of that.
So moved.
Support.
It's been motioned and supported to approve the estimate for Old US 23 rehab project. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, miscellaneous business, we have none. And public remarks. Does anybody else like to make some comments? Okay, would you please use the podium?
Donita Sanders, 12345 Alcoy Drive. Your so-called specialist from the Livingston County, Matt Boline, came out here and told us the water ran northeast off the property. There's no way. That water's on the hill. I'm down at the bottom of the hill. It runs right down their property, along the north border of my property, the east border of my property, and it runs from east to west across the bottom of my property. There's no way that water, he doesn't even know which way the water runs. He doesn't know when you walk out there on that place, and one of the guys over here can attest to this, there's standing water all around the 1.3 acres. And he said, well, if they want to use more of this property, they can come back and hit us up again, and we'll do another group, and then they can use it. They've already deemed that the 1.3 acres is the only bit of property on that 10 acres that's dry enough to bury a body in. That's what they stated at the meeting. Al Poole was there, he should know that. I mean, even the guy there said, they can't do it, it's too wet. They did other boreholes, they all failed. So this Matt Bowling doesn't know which way the water flows, and that's the way I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you. You can come on over, wait if you like.
Linda Koenig, 12231 Germany Road. And I just want to thank you guys for paying attention to the residents. I think it's very important that you do this environmental study.
Environmental
And
impact study.
thank you, I appreciate it.
I too want to thank this board for listening to us and putting up with our comments. I have a comment that's not related to cemetery. It's related to the pavement on Denton Hill Road between Holford. There's a water problem there that maybe you want to look at before you pave the road. There's a large pond that keeps on growing and growing. Its water sometimes comes almost up to the roadway, and maybe that before the pavement gets done.
Did they,
Where's that at?
It's a
that's your
large-
property, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, I was kind of asking quietly, but I think that might
Thanks for pointing that out.
be, yeah, thanks.
Water that sits on the east side of the road never existed as a pond at all, and now it's grown tremendously. I think that the road commission was out to clean out or replace a culvert there a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Drain Commission was.
But that pond that's floating on...
Just to be clear, I'm on the west side. I own the property on the west side, so.
The property on the pond that's on the west side
It's on the
of
west
road
side, yeah.
is probably about 6 times what it was. The water isn't draining there.
Well, we're thinking of stocking it, but go ahead.
Really?
No, just kidding.
What they'll do is, when they go out and do that, if there's any cross tubes and drainage issues, they replace those and they rut them out. And they also work on some of the roadside culverts to increase them. You've seen some of the work they've already done over there, right?
Sure. Now, the water, it's not the problem, it's draining under the road. It's not draining from the road to
No,
where it
it's
should.
the other way. Yeah, it's the other side of the problem.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be glad to
off the
talk to you
road,
offline,
there's
and
not-
I'll be glad to talk to the Drain Commission. It makes it non-usable land for me, so I'd be glad to talk to you, to talk with you to the Drain Commission again. I mean, I've given them permission to come across the property all they want, but yeah, I get it that it's growing all the time.
That is yours, then?
Well, actually, the irony is I share it. So in the spirit of transparency, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of it's mine, and then the other fourth is the property to the north of me then.
Would you be open to a drain assessment to address the issue? No, I'm just kidding.
The problem is, water is backing up on the east side and on the west side that isn't draining.
I'll contact the road and the drain commission
Yeah,
on
and
that.
actually, the real problem is, ironically, it is, because I've talked to him, it's the west side. There's
Okay.
something that's changed back there, and it's the west side, it's not the east side.
The water isn't getting out of the east side, though.
Yeah, no, I get that, but what I'm telling you is that the reason that thing is filling up is not what's underneath and not on the east side, it's the west side. That's the problem.
I just thought they wanted to know before you.
We'll have them look at it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Ron Shelley, 12330 Elcoy. Yeah, the biggest plug up is, I think, on Cabani's property. Probably just the aged branches and what have you are getting in there. What I kind of want to do is touch on a couple of things that have been mentioned already. One was this 5 tons of animal waste being buried. From what I understand, maybe Ed will touch upon it, this is a one-time deal per acre. If they're talking 65 bodies, same thing. One and only one time, it's not an annual basis. When we were talking with the Planning Commission, we had a lot of discussion on various things, which some of you missed out on. One of the things, Monroe had done their analysis, and they pretty much says it was a wetland. It's written up in some of their papers. There were 10 boreholes made earlier, which we were not aware of, and we eventually got it. Out of the 10, only 3 passed. So then they moved some of them. One of them was right in the roadway of where the cemetery was going to go, the entrance. 5 that were remaining, one of them was right on the verge of the water table. I don't remember, I think it was marked up as seasonal water table, permanent water table. So anyway, it kind of violates the Livingston County's own guidelines, which I think they should live by, and they seem to have kind of passed it. It says, well, it's okay, even though it's not roads. My wife touched upon it a little bit, and we did do a lot during the Planning Commission meetings. The last comment I would have, when you talk about an environmental impact study, it might be noted that it should be done by somebody other than Rowe Engineering, because you'd have a conflict of interest in that
That's true.
outfit.
Can't be there.
That's it.
Well, they're a civil engineering firm, aren't they? They would have
I
to
don't know.
hire, yeah, they're a
But-
civil engineering firm. They're going to have to hire an environmental engineering firm, if I'm not
You still
mistaken.
have to get somebody that's different because of potential conflict of interest. I mean, they're a customer of theirs. And as far as the cost goes, I mean, if you're talking $10,000, $20,000, they're gonna sink that much into their gravel road. It's the cost of doing business. Okay.
Ed Murray, 12271 Germany Road. I want to thank all of you for approving the environmental impact I have a question, maybe you can help me out here. Application for new cemetery would be pretty stringent. Now, are they supposed to have this done and approved and submit?
This is the first step. They have to get local approval before they can get state approval.
All right. Not know that, so I wanted to find it.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Gerald Mantell is my name, 12210 Germany Road. While you're talking about roads, it's not like it's open night for road complaints. Or
No, it's not, but go ahead.
I understand they don't have money to do a lot, but it just seems to me, driving on it where it's banked up on both sides, grader goes down there without tilting their blade to cause the water to run down the sides of the road. It just runs down the middle of the road, off the bank like you're driving in a river bottom, you know? And it's not just Germany Road, but any of the roads of that same status, you know, what do you call it, grade, road quality or grade level. But one gentleman said he would be talking with the county road personnel, and I just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you.
Just to be clear.
My name is Pam Williams. I'm at 7189 Heartland Road. I live directly across from the Gardner Cemetery. Our well is probably 250 feet from the beginning of the first grave. We've had our water tested numerous times because there was a lot of older graves, so there was no crypts or cement or anything. You know, they were put in wooden boxes. And our water is wonderful. The guy said bottle it. I mean, it was so good. So we never were impacted. Now, of course, that was years ago, and the bodies, most of them have decomposed. But my daughter is I'm not picking sides. I'm just trying to give facts so you can make decisions. My daughter is a licensed funeral director. And I'm not sure if she'll make it. I called her about some of the things going back and forth, but she knows about formaldehyde and all the stuff that has to be used, and also about green burials. One of her suggestions was, why doesn't people look or call the green burial places in Michigan and get their information? Like, what was did they need impact studies? Environmental impact studies? How did it affect the people around them? What they had to go through to get approved, so that you can get a decision made based on facts and not hearsay or guessing.
Yeah, there was some of that in our board packet. As you knew, we had over 250 pages of our board packet, and more than 200 of it was about the cemetery.
A lot of megabytes.
Yeah, I got a deep dive education in cemeteries, green, and I read things that were from the 1800s, and
Right.
yeah, so
Right. Well, my concern too is who's the closest to this cemetery? Like, what homes, how far away are the homes? Like, because if we're not being impacted by it,
right.
I mean, I don't know, I don't have
Sure.
all that information. I'm just saying, I just want to make sure facts are told and not
Right.
guessing. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
The question is, how close are homes? I did a little bit of mapping here for wells and stuff, and we have one well that is about 200 feet from the cemetery site, and we have one across the street that's 425. The rest, I believe, are beyond 750.
Thank you. Any other comments? Will you please use the microphone? So the reason we do that is because we record these, and people like to hear what's being said. In fact, if anybody else would like to talk, you can go ahead and be seated over here so you can access the podium.
In regards to the local cemeteries that are very close within the area, Gardner and also Hodges. Okay. Hodges Cemetery, which is just probably 3 miles south of this proposed cemetery. Around 200 years old. Established around, I think, 1836, but if you go in there and look at the grave markers, some are older than that. They barely have 200 bodies. So we're looking at an average of a body a year for 200 years. Gardner Cemetery. It's even older. They probably have about 400 bodies there. Could be 500. So we're looking at 2 to 2.5 bodies a year for 200 years. I want to make sure you have your information also, because I've been there and I went to those cemeteries and I walked around and I looked at all those headstones. Wow. As far as I know, there's no wetlands around either one of those two cemeteries, all on top of the hill. And actually, if you want to bury a loved one, prices start at $550 to around $750, depending on which cemetery you want to use. Proposed Aspen Cemetery, which is going to be, I believe, $3,000 a plot. So it's a bargain. So keep that in mind.
Maybe if it's
Maybe we don't want to let that information out because maybe we'll have a large influx of people trying to buy plots there. Maybe they'll keep them out of the Aspen Cemetery and keep that level down. So information for you. Fine, thank you.
Any other further comments, direct them to the board. This is not a forum to banter between your neighbors and other people, so please keep that in mind. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Jerry Sanders. Day job, microbiologist, deal with everything from bacteria to parasites. I'm also been a resident in this area for the last 20 years. But we were on Alcoy Drive. We have a well, and we're concerned about the water, about due diligence applied to the decision-making process. I'm sure you've heard some of this already, so I'll try to be brief. Not necessarily is everyone following law? Now, we've had people that have come forth and said, well, nothing we can do about it. All the potential risks. Discussion last time about, well, we can test the wells. That sounds like a good idea. Folk took it, run with it. Wells. All that tells you is the problem has arisen. It is here. What you want to do is to problem from showing up in the first place. That means analysis of the area where the cemetery is proposed. Lighted and sort of surrounded by wetlands. You've got wells. What you need to do, or what I would suggest is, what does the soil surrounding the we have a situation where there was a line of test sites that just so happened to coincide with the proper soil. What you have is a nice ridge. Bodies decompose. The bacteria and the substance move off the ridge into the soil, and it percolates over time into the water body. The scientific literature states it multiple times. What they did is they ran test bores around the cemeteries links, and they sample populations, sites, sample. These are all established cemeteries. This is a new one. This is theoretically a green cemetery. Mind, ladies and gentlemen, green doesn't necessarily mean always good. It's a nice term. Benefits, there's also risk with green. Don't use embalming fluid, but you don't have to worry about contamination of the soil with embalming fluid, but embalming fluid survives a couple of days. Day, 2 days, something like that. And then it's broken down. Microorganisms can survive, some can survive practically forever. Those that will be associated with those bodies. Spore formers. And they remain dormant in the soil. Conditions are right. Up. And may migrate with the water table. So, I would strongly recommend insuring those. Have them before burial starts so you get a baseline, and then monitor them on a regular basis. Or you're not getting movement of bacterial products, microorganisms, possibly even viruses, or decomposition products from the water table. Some of those decomposition products are also toxic, and they don't break down as easily. Also, another nifty thing, have the area surrounded with trees. Soak up the water and help contain potential. And if you do have a problem, the monitoring will say, hey, we have a problem here. We need to do something about it. And that would occur before we get a water contamination and people start coming down with illness. And then it's too late to do anything about it. Now you got to deal with it. Approach. Flint, they've been dealing with things for years. They have been trying to fix problems. Landscaping event off the Flint campus. Contamination with PCBs. It's been moving towards the Flint River. Now, they've taken down the trees, they pulled up the soil, massive change there.
No. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you all for coming. We have no other business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Been motioned and supported to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
It's right in the ballpark.